Over the last couple of days, Games Workshop has given us a pretty good look at what datasheets are going to look like in Warhammer 40k 10th edition. So I just wanted to take a quick minute to break down what those will look like. So here we've got the new Terminator squad datasheet for the next edition of Warhammer 40k. And as you can see, there's kind of a lot to look at here, but it is nice and condensed compared to, all of the places we had to look up rules in 9th edition. So, starting up at the top with the stat line, a lot of this will look familiar. We've got movement, so 5-inch movement, pretty standard stuff. Toughness 5, save, wound, leadership, and OC. Obviously, leadership looks a little bit different than we're used to in 9th edition. They haven't really broken down the leadership system much, but it seems like it's going to be some kind of 2-die roll to determine if the unit comes under any effects. Now, objective control, they did break down a good bit. So objective control is going to be the number of objective control points that a unit contributes towards the overall control of an objective on the board. So the amount of objective control points will determine which player controls that objective. As we can see here, the Terminator has an objective control score of 1. Meanwhile, the intercessors that they showed yesterday have an objective control score of 2, which means that troops are going to be a little bit more effective at controlling objectives, but they don't have objectives secured anymore, so they won't just totally override each other. Now, going back and looking at the toughness, you'll notice that Terminators are now toughness 5 as opposed to toughness 4, which they were previously. This kind of lines up with what Games Workshop was talking about before during the live stream, when they were saying that toughness is kind of going up across the board. So while intercessors are going to remain toughness 4, things like Terminators are going to remain toughness 5. I have to assume that things in Gravis, like aggressors and stuff, will also just remain at toughness 5. But they did say that there's going to be things like vehicles and stuff that go all the way up to toughness 11 and 12. I have to assume that 12 is going to be the max, but they haven't gotten too into the weeds on that just yet. Now, coming on down and looking at the weapons, you'll notice ranged weapons and melee weapons look kind of similar, but there's a few little different distinctions. But we'll start with the ranged weapons. So the best one for us to look at as an example, I think, is going to be the Stormbolter, because they get a little bit into the details on the keywords and stuff. So starting with that, we've obviously got our range here, which is standard. That's how we do it now. Attacks is different. Attacks used to be written next to the weapon type. So you would have Assault 2, Heavy 2, Rapid Fire 2, something like that, which is no longer the case. You just have Gun. Gun has 2 attacks. Ballistic Skill is now attached to the weapon. So instead of relying on the ballistic skill that was normally on the unit's stat line, it can now change between weapons. But the Terminator on their ranged weapons pretty much has ballistic skill 3 across the board, except for the Flamer. Now, the rest of the weapon stat line remains pretty similar. You have Strength 4, AP 0, 1 damage. That's just normal how we do it in 9th edition currently. But then going back over a little bit, we see that there's now a keyword next to the weapon name. So Rapid Fire 2 is now a keyword instead of being a weapon type. So this is in line with GW talking about bringing back universal special rules. So Rapid Fire, I have to assume, will be game-wide. Anybody can have a Rapid Fire weapon, and what Rapid Fire means is if a weapon has Rapid Fire X, X being a number, they get that many extra attacks if they're within half of that weapon's range. So it operates similarly to how Rapid Fire currently works, but instead of doubling attacks, you get however many extra it says next to Rapid Fire. Now, going down to the melee weapons, it's very similar, except obviously you don't have the range anymore, but you have your weapon here, you have another keyword next to it. This one is anti-vehicle 3+. Range is going to be melee because it's a melee weapon. Attacks are now built into the weapons instead of being part of the data stat line, as well as the weapon skill and strength now being just flat numbers applied to the weapon itself. The rest of it remains the same, strength 8, AP -2, 2 damage, but they break down the anti-vehicle keyword a little bit, so let's talk about that for a sec. So anti-weapons are going to be an entire kind of category of weapon on their own. They can be anti any keyword, it sounds like. So they can be anti-infantry, they can be anti-vehicle, anti-monster, things like that. And so when you make attacks against units with that keyword, unmodified wound rolls of X+ score critical wounds. X+ being whatever number is there next to your anti-blank X whatever. Now what a critical wound is it's a guaranteed success. So normally you have to roll 6+ to, guarantee that you're going to wound something 100% of the time, but that is no longer the case if you have an anti-weapon. So looking back at the Chain Fist here, it's anti-vehicle 3+. That means when you're attacking a vehicle with a Chain Fist, a 3+ will automatically wound all the time, 100% of the time. So now let's move on over and take a look at the abilities. Starting at the top, you see Core Deep Strike. So this is again another example of GW going back to Universal Special Rules. A core ability, I would assume, means that any codex can have access to this ability because it's just part of the core rulebook. So Deep Strike is going to be just a core rule. There's not going to be any weird fluffy names for it like Deep Strike, Warp Strike, whatever different versions that everybody has. If anybody has the ability to teleport into the board outside of 9 inches of enemy units, that's all just going to be called Deep Strike. Now, Oath of Moment is a faction ability, which means anybody that is running just the Space Marines faction will have access to the Oath of Moment ability. They didn't exactly say what Oath of Moment is, but based on some of the things that we'll read later, it sounds like you pick an enemy unit during a turn and you get some kind of bonus against that unit. Alright, so scooting on down a little bit, we've got Teleport Homer. So on current Terminators, the Teleport Homer is a piece of war gear that they have that allows them to, at any point during the battle, teleport somewhere else on the battlefield, outside of 9 inches of enemy models, and within your own deployment zone. Now you'll put a little Teleport Homer token on the battlefield when the game starts, anywhere that's not within your opponent's deployment zone, and once per battle, you can use the Rapid Ingress stratagem on the Terminators for 0 CP, but that unit has to go within 3 inches of that token and not within 9 inches of any enemy models. And since they mentioned Rapid Ingress, we can go ahead and take a quick look at what stratagems look like now in 10th edition. In my opinion, this is a much more readable and easily digestible format than we have it in 9th edition currently. So on the left side there's that arrow. I don't know if that actually means anything. They haven't gotten into that yet, so we'll see if that symbol means anything or if it's just there for decoration. I have to imagine it means something though, because right below it in another diamond is 1 CP, which is just the command point cost of this stratagem. Now instead of stratagems just being a big block of text that you have to try and parse, it breaks it down step by step. Here's how you use this stratagem. When, at the end of your opponent's movement phase, target 1 unit from your army that is in reserve. So if your Terminators are in Deep Strike, boom, you use this. Effect, your unit can arrive on the battlefield as if it were the reinforcement step of your movement phase. That's easy, that's concise, you know exactly what you're supposed to do with it. Restrictions, you cannot use this stratagem to enable a unit to arrive on the battlefield during a battle round it would not normally be able to do so in. So I'm assuming that the no deep striking on turn 1 restriction is going to remain in the game, and this basically just prevents you from trying to get around that with this stratagem. Alright, back on the data sheet, moving on down a little bit, we've got the Fury of the First ability. Now this one kind of interacts with the faction Oaths of Moment ability a little bit. And so whenever a Terminator squad attacks the target of the Oaths of Moment ability, you can ignore all ballistic skill, weapons skill modifiers, plus they get +1 to the hit roll. So it sounds like they will be very deadly towards whatever your Oaths of Moment target is. It sounds like we're going to be finding out exactly what Oath of Moment is tomorrow, so we'll do a little bit of an update on that whenever we find out. But for now, we're just going to assume that it's like a +1 to wound or something like that. You get some kind of extra bonus against whatever that unit you're attacking is with your, I would assume, your entire army. And then Fury of the First gives these Terminators an extra little boost to help them be even more deadly towards that specific targeted unit. And finally, we have their invulnerable save listed down here at the bottom. They have a 4-up invul now, as opposed to the 5-up that Terminators typically have. Part of me wonders if this means that 3-up invuls are going to kind of make a little bit of a return. Currently, we only have those in very few places. Like, I think Grey Knights have one. Ultramarines have them because they're still an 8th edition codex, technically. But maybe we'll start seeing a little bit of a wider range of invuls coming back. I do kind of wish that invuln saves were listed just on the stat line or something if they have one. But this is fine too. It's not that big of a deal. And the last thing we got to look at on our data sheet here is the keywords. So we've got Infantry, Imperium, Terminator, Terminator Squad, and Adeptus Astartes. Now, some keen-eyed viewers of you out there might notice that the core keyword is missing. We can only assume that means core has been removed from the game, which I will not miss it. Core, I think, was a great idea in theory, but it wasn't executed very well, and I think that there's probably better ways to do what the core keyword was meant to accomplish. If I had to guess, some of the detachment abilities and stuff will be targeted towards specific unit types, so like Terminator or Terminator Squad, as opposed to, you know, relying on abilities that target core units in particular. Now, another thing that's a little interesting to me that I don't really know what to make of is that the Imperium keyword is no longer listed under faction keywords, it's just a normal keyword. And another one that you might notice is missing is the chapter keyword. This is because the way subfactions operate is completely changing in 10th edition. Now, they haven't talked about it too much, especially when talking about the Space Marine chapters, but it sounds like chapters may be going away kind of altogether and instead will be replaced by these detachments. So detachments will give you your entire army an extra ability on top of their faction ability. And if you pick a different detachment, it will just replace all of the bonuses you get from your other detachment. So that's what they're talking about when they say one in, one out. All of the detachment abilities, when you switch detachments, they'll just completely get rid of the other ones, and boom, you've got new detachment abilities. Now, I don't really know what this means for chapters. I don't know if this means they're getting rid of chapters altogether, or if chapters are going to have their own special detachments, or what. I guess we're just going to kind of have to wait and see. Hopefully they'll get into that a little bit, because I don't really know how I feel about the potential of chapters just disappearing. Alright, anyways, that's kind of all we have to look at that GW's been talking about over the last couple of days with the datasheets. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the new datasheet layout. I'm pretty positive on it. I would like to hear if you guys have any different opinions, or what you think about it just in general. Let me know how excited you are about 10th edition. Are you amped? Are you a little bit wary? Yeah, let me know down in the comments, and I will catch you guys in the next one.